Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Nickel Press TV. This is week 14. We're talking fantasy football waiver wire, start sits, major topic lines going into our first official week of the fantasy football playoff. My name is Doug Moore. I'm with Nickel Press TV. I'm a writer over at Bro Jackson, Rasball. Joined this week by a buddy of mine I've been talking to a while. We've talked about fantasy football things. He does it, on the side. He's a writer. He's very knowledgeable about the sport itself, and I'm glad to have him on this week. Jeff Spiegel, how are you?
Hey, Doug. Thanks for having me.
No, not a problem. It's my pleasure. It's I'm glad to have you on, especially in this pivotal week. A lot of teams, that I've helped, I know, are in the playoffs. Almost every league is in the playoffs this week. So obviously it's do or die for most, and that could mean, money won or money lost. So that's what we're here for. We're going to be talking about, the storylines going into week 14, who to pick up and who to start and sit this week. We'll dive right in first with, I would guess, the major storylines going into week 14. And this carousel, this story I want to talk about, this carousel continues to be changing every week. There's been now 3 starting quarterbacks this season for this team, and they are going back to their troubled, maybe not troubled, but their quarterback who's in the spotlight a lot. The Browns announced today that Johnny Manziel is again the starting quarterback after Josh McCown broke his collarbone last week, 2 weeks ago, and then Austin Davis started over the weekend but did very poorly. So, Jeff, I want to ask you, Johnny Manziel, obviously he's a quarterback who, he's got some skills. He's got some arm strength. He's got a big arm, and he can run. He can run the ball and all that. And he has some decent playmakers on that team. We're not talking about Josh Gordon that they hopefully would have had, or say a Julio Jones or Odell Beckham, but they do have some weapons. We're talking about Gary Barnidge, Travis Benjamin, Duke Johnson. So I wanted to ask you, how do you view, going forward, say that those 4 players I mentioned, what would you view Manziel as? And would you say Travis Benjamin, Gary Barnes, or Duke Johnson? How do you feel about them? Is their stock increase or decrease with Manziel back at quarterback?
Yeah, Johnny Manziel's an explosive player. We knew that since the first moment he stepped on the field at A&M, and he definitely had a lot more talent there. He went up with Mike Evans and some great linemen that went top 10 overall, and I think this week is really pivotal for him in his journey as an NFL quarterback. He's been in the spotlight his whole life, sometimes for the wrong thing, but this week against the Niners, I think he has a lot of upside, to be honest. He's been able to do some decent things with Travis Benjamin. He's found it on some deep throws, and it seems like Brian Hartline is kind of coming in and emerging as that number 2 in a questionable offense. But I think anytime you start a Browns player not named Gary Barnidge, you kind of expect that they'll get, 5 points or less. But at the same time, you hope that there is that big play ability. Maybe he connects with Benjamin on a 60-yarder or, continues checking down to Duke Johnson, who is really rising the ranks, in my opinion, as kind of a superstar in the PPR league. So I'd put him about 13 points this week. He's going to do some things great, and they're going up against the Niners, a team that's definitely in the same realm as the Browns. But I think Johnny should surprise some people this week.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're talking, and like you brought up a good point, the 49ers and the Browns are sort of in the same situation there. Below 500, they've had quarterback changes this season, and just they've struggled on both sides of the ball, on both offense and defense. I would say the number one thing is, you never know what you're going to get from Johnny Manziel because he has a big arm, but he's an erratic thrower. And then also he's got that ability to run with the ball. So that always helps him in terms of his fantasy value. I'll be talking about actually a Browns player later who I love, and this week I'm not loving him so much. But, if this is the week, if there's any week where he could actually go out and maybe silence some doubters, this would be the week. And like you brought up, he's always got that ability to throw down deep to Travis Benjamin, who I think I want to say week 3 or something like that. That's when Travis Benjamin really emerged onto the scene, when Johnny Manziel was at quarterback. I think McCown had a concussion or something like that. But yeah, and then my concern, Duke Johnson, you brought up, has been surprisingly good in the PPR game. He gets most of his damage in the receiving game. I'm concerned because Manziel doesn't check down a lot, and that's where Duke Johnson does his work. You brought up Brian Hartline. That's another good point. He's really come on as their number 2 guy. Granted, that doesn't really mean much, but he's put strung together a few games where he's done decently, but it's hard to trust him. So that's something definitely to keep, an eye on going forward. Wanted to move into next, two in particular, 2 rookie wide receivers who both are coming off of great games. For me, I trust Devontae Parker more than Dorial Green-Beckham. Devontae Parker has come in since Rashard Matthews went down with broken ribs. He scored a touchdown in both games and gone over 60 yards receiving in both games. And then we have Dorial Green-Beckham, who has been wishy-washy this season. He's coming off a 119-yard and a touchdown performance this past Sunday. So for me, I like Parker better than Dorial Green-Beckham. I think he's more trustworthy, and I just think that offense runs better, especially now that they're starting to establish the run game more. And to think about this way, I believe Ryan Tannehill threw for 86 yards on Sunday, a ridiculously low number, but 63 of them went to Devontae Parker, which tells you something. But I want to ask you, Jeff, do you buy both of them? Or, do you sell one of them? Do you buy the other or sell both? And, regardless of it, is this something that can actually stay consistent? Can they both put up consistent numbers, or is this just an outlier, a fluke?
Yeah, you're right. Devontae Parker has been more consistent this year. He's definitely come on the last 2 games, and looking at his schedule right now, he's got the Giants, the Chargers, the Colts, and the Patriots week 17. So he does have an opportunity to make a name across from Jarvis Landry. And I would go with him. I usually look for receivers that are going to get me, 7 catches, 70 yards or so, maybe a touchdown, maybe not. I look for consistency. And on that note, Dorial Green-Beckham is pretty much the exact opposite. He kind of reminds me of Dwayne Bowe back in the day, where he could get 2 catches and 20 yards but get a touchdown just because he's such a big red zone threat. And he's going against the Jets this week. I'm sure he'll see a lot of Antonio Cromartie, who's another big corner. They'll be in his face. But looking into next year, I'd probably put my eggs in Dorial Green-Beckham's basket, simply because he's connected to Mariota, who knows how to score better than a lot of quarterbacks. May throw a bunch of picks, but at the end of the day, he's from Oregon. They put up points for a living. So, towards the end of the year, I would go with Devontae Parker if you need a receiver in that flex position. But, looking to the future, I'm not entirely sold on Tannehill as the Dolphins quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going through, but the Dolphins are going through an offensive coordinator change. This was the first game of the season we saw. I can't remember off the top of my head what his name was, but they just they fired their offensive coordinator and they put in a position coach, and they made sure that they emphasized more on the run game, which we saw with Lamar Miller getting, I think, 20 touches, and thus Tannehill getting 86 yards passing, which I couldn't believe when I saw that, especially because I played Jarvis Landry in a few DFS matchups, and really burned me when he got 2 catches for 15 yards in a really good matchup. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see how much they focus on the run as opposed to the pass. But going up for 1 week where this is the first week the offensive coordinator, it looks like they're going to make passing sort of the secondary option as opposed to running the ball, which, with Lamar Miller, you have a chance. He especially in the receiving game as well. He's put up numbers in the receiving game as well. So I'm a Lamar Miller owner. I really like this news, and in my my big money league, I have him, and he rewarded me this week. And that was probably good news when we saw the offensive coordinator change, because it's been so vanilla. When you have playmakers like Tannehill, he's still got a chance. I still believe in him. It's going to take some work, though. He's definitely had a down year compared to last. Then you got Lamar Miller, you got Jarvis Landry, you got Rashard Matthews when he's healthy, but then you also got, Devontae Parker as well. So there's definitely weapons there. And it'll be interesting to see, at least for the rest of the season, how they emphasize the run as opposed to the pass. Does it become a detriment to the pass game and they focus more on the run? That'll be interesting to see. But I think that as long as Rashard Matthews is out, Devontae Parker is at least a strong flex play, considering, like you said, he's got 4 pretty easy matchups this week, especially if Dorial Green-Beckham doesn't even play for the Jets, which would mean Antonio Cromartie might be on Devontae Parker, or he could be even on, Jarvis Landry a little bit, where, we're seeing Buster Screen, I think, on Devontae Parker, which I think is a plus matchup for him.
I don't know. I've liked Buster. My old roommates are Browns fans, so I was forced to watch a lot of those games. And opposite Joe Hayden is not always an easy task. But last year, he kind of proved that he was emerging, an emerging talent. He's done some great things this year opposite, the number 2 or number 3 receiver. That Jets D is about as questionable as it gets. They'll show up one game and disappear the next. So who really knows how that game's going to go?
Yeah, especially when you dealt with the past 2 games you've been without arguably your biggest playmaker in Dorial Green-Beckham, who basically could shut down an entire side of the field. Still not maybe as efficient, but still can do that. But yeah, it'll be interesting. The Dolphins. I don't believe they've won that game against. I want to say it was. I can't remember, but I don't think they won. But they obviously, like I said, ran the ball well, and that's what they made emphasis on. Dan Campbell, the new offensive coordinator. So it'll be interesting to see. I still think that Devontae Parker has a chance to put up numbers, even if they're going to make passing their secondary option compared to the run. But going into, I guess, another situation where we have to figure out if this is a fluke or if this is something that we're seeing for real. James White over the weekend, and I'm a Patriots fan. It was tough for me to see this, but James White was probably one of the lone bright spots. At least, not only for me as a Patriots fan, but also, as a guy who is interested and follows more closely, I guess, than some with their situation. He didn't do much in the run game. He had 2 rushes for 4 yards. But in the passing game, he had 10 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown on 13 targets, which was tied for first with Danny Amendola. They've sort of abandoned the run game a little bit. LeGarrette Blount has not been used as much, especially, with they've lost weapons this season with Edelman going down with a foot injury, Dion Lewis going down with a knee injury, and now Gronk out who knows how long with a knee injury as well, and Amendola just coming back from a knee injury himself. So I guess my question to you is James White for real? Or is this just based on, game flow? Was this based on just, the hot hand of the time? Or is this something where we could see him be, like a Duke Johnson almost, where he does almost all of his work in the receiving game, but obviously he's in a more high-powered offense, James White that is with New England. So I guess if I had to boil it down, is James White for real, or is this just a fluke?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely for real. I mean, they've been missing playmakers all year, and as long as Edelman's on the sideline and Dion Lewis and Gronk are, watching from the bench, somebody's got to get the ball. And Brady's not shy. He's going to check down and make sure that the linebackers are covering him in the open field. And one great thing about him is he can go from the backfield and play in the slot, or run some routes and whatnot, which gives him a whole different versatility compared to like Garrett Blount. And it just looks like Blount has lost a step this year. I mean, he used to be a big bruiser, and maybe it's just a matchup thing, but I haven't seen him really pound the rock like he used to. So I'm pretty big on James White. I think the Patriots always need that check down target out of the backfield. Kind of reminds me of Kevin Falk back in the day. Somebody's going to. Yeah, I'm a big Patriots guy too, so I'm very fond of the swing routes and whatnot. And believe me, if the guy can make moves in the open space, the Patriots will find a way to get him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen relative unknowns with, obviously Deion Lewis, and then Damian Amendola, who wasn't expected to do much, but then obviously, has now become a fantasy commodity just based upon injuries, and also, he can play that slot pretty well, and that's what Brady's game is in the short to intermediate game. So that sort of works best with, checkdowns, where we've seen, Shane Vereen be the guy, Deion Lewis, and now James White predictably, or even Brandon Bolden or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you got Amendola over the middle, and then, Scott Chandler actually has a really tough matchup this week against Houston, who actually I think is in the top 10 against tight ends over the past 5 weeks, from what I was doing my research earlier. So this could be a matchup where we see Scott Chandler be shut down a little bit. Amendola is going to be, covered or double covered. Who knows? LaFell hasn't done much really. He had, at least compared to last year. And then, by default, you got to throw it to James White, who at least looked really good on Sunday. And for Patriots fans, maybe he's the spark that they need, because they almost won that, at least almost tied that game. I have to hold that a little bit. They came back, 35-14 to come within a score. And, so who knows? Maybe James White is the guy that the Patriots and Brady needs to help replace some of their losses. I think just by default, by injuries, and just by, next man up, which is their philosophy, I would think James White could be for real. I don't think he's a 10 catch, 115 yards, a touchdown type of guy. We could see him getting close, 70 targets, 6 catches, 50-something yards, which is double-digit points in PPR. So I think it's for real. I don't think he's going to put up, 20 points a week, but he could definitely hit double digits in PPR leagues.
Yep.
I want to touch on him. I want to touch on this guy a little bit. Now, I've been a big fan of him since, he first started doing well, and I don't think I have to go much into it. But Sean Jarwin has done really well in San Francisco since he took over the starting spot since Carlos Hyde's been out. And it doesn't look like Carlos Hyde is going to come back this season. They haven't officially put him on the IR, but they haven't ruled it out either, and he's not practicing. So at least for another week, Sean Jarwin is definitely the guy in San Francisco. And in his first 4 games, in the 4 games he's played with them as a starter, he has gone for at least 75 yards combined and 18 touches. He is the bell cow in that offense. And I actually, it's crazy to think, but with Blaine Gabbert at quarterback, he's actually been operating better, because Blaine Gabbert, I think, at least this season, has been a better passer than Colin Kaepernick. Working with the tight ends, working with Anquan Bolden, and then also throwing down deep to Torrey Smith. And Sean Jordan has been focused in the pass game as well. He's gotten 22 catches in those 4 games, so 5.5 catches a game on 27 targets. So we're talking nearly 8 targets a game, using that 4-game example. And he's got an extremely well matchup this week against the Browns, who have been horrible against the run. So I think not only do you pick him up, I think he's a guy you could put in your running back 2 slot, because I think he's not only going to be using the run game a lot, I think he's going to be using the pass game a lot as well, as he has been. And he could really put up 100 yards combined and a touchdown. What is your quick take on Sean Drone? Am I crazy, or are you on the drone express here?
I mean, he's been doing some great things, like you said. He's kind of that new age running back that we're seeing. He doesn't need to get 120 yards on the ground anymore. There's more than one way, to get it done. And 75 on the ground and 50 through the, receiving is pretty much every fantasy owner's dream. I mean, absolutely a RB2. Who knows when Hyde will be back this year. I mean, he's a young guy. I wouldn't rush him back by any means, and might as well give this guy a shot. And Gabbert's been playing well. He's kept them in, games against the Cardinals, and, they won last week at the Bears in a game everyone thought they were just going to roll over. So, I'm not going to say I'm buying the 49ers as a whole, but they definitely look improved over the past couple weeks. So why not give him a shot against the Browns and see where that takes you?
Yeah, I'm hoping he keeps up the streak, if not does more. I know I'm going to be. I think I have him in 3 out of my 4 DFS lineup this week. Just love the matchup, love his price, and just what he's done consistently as the starter. I think even one week he was the only running back who got touches. So it's definitely encouraging to see it. Another guy I guess I wanted to really talk about real quick, I don't think we have to talk about too much like Sean Jerome, that's Doug Baldwin. He has scored 5 receiving touchdowns over the past 3 games. He had 3 in Week 12, and he had 2 on Sunday in Week 13. He has finished with at least 90 yards receiving in 3 of the past 4 games. And he's going up against the Ravens this week, who have been really bad against the pass. And Russell Wilson has been red hot as of late. So I love this matchup for him, especially now that Jimmy Graham is out for the season. By default, Russell Wilson has to throw to somebody else. Not that he was doing much with him, but Doug Baldwin seems to be that guy. He's, like I said, 5 touchdowns in 2 games, and he's also in 6 in 4 games as well. 90 yards in at least 3 of the 4 games, past 5 games, 3 out of 5, so 60% of the time. No, out of the past 4, I'm sorry, I was looking at something else. And, like I said, he's going against the Ravens, really bad at defending the run, really bad against defending the pass, and, the Seahawks have been red hot on offense lately. I think they destroyed Minnesota on Sunday, like 35-7 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I love this matchup for Doug Baldwin. I think he'll continue. Not saying he's going to get more than 1 touchdown. I think he definitely has a chance at a touchdown and 100 yards, just considering how much he's been thrown to, and also just how explosive that offense has been lately. What about you? Do you think, again, this is a guy like Sean Jerome where he could hit triple-digit yardage and a touchdown this week?
Yeah, I'm a lot more skeptical on Doug Baldwin. I've been a huge Russell guy. I got him as my QB1 this year, so I've been watching him pretty closely. It is always tough whenever you take a Seahawks receiver because that's not the main vocal point of their offense. They've always been, Marshawn first and passing, play action passing game. But Russell, he's done a lot of good things this year. Standing in shotgun and hitting that, that slot right up the seam. I mean, that's how they beat the Packers last year. And between him and Tyler Lockett, I think they're both, 80 yards a pop. One of them's going to get a touchdown. One of them's not. It's just kind of, whether you hit or miss. But I think he's a great play in the flex position. I actually have Tyler Lockett in my flex this week. I've been rolling with him all year, so I'm stacking up him and Russell, hoping that against Baltimore, they're just going to let the ball fly in the first half and take that game over early, and then probably let Rawls handle the workload from there on out. But for Doug, it's like keep playing him until he proves you wrong. That's kind of my philosophy.
Yeah, you brought up a point here where, I think they're going to air it out, like you said, at least in the first half. Baltimore's actually been really well against the run in fantasy the past 5 weeks. So it could prove to be a passing game where, again, Seattle has been tough against the run as well. And, obviously there's a big disparity between Matt Schaub and Russell Wilson in terms of talent. But I think this could be more of an aerial matchup considering how well both teams have been against the run. Like you said, Baltimore, I think, is first in fewest points allowed per game in the past 5 weeks to running backs. And I think, I want to say half PPR, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a really tough matchup for the run. I think it could force Seattle to go against the grain and be more of a passing team, which they seem to have been more often lately, even though Thomas Rawls has put up solid points despite that. We got two more positions to hit on. For me, I'm not even going to talk about this guy as a pickup this week. I'll be talking about him more in a little bit. But for now, I think especially this week, Austin Seferian-Jenkins is a pickup that you got to get. Everybody's got to get him. He missed 9 games with a shoulder injury. Now, granted, we don't know what exactly it was, but that's over 2 months. But he comes back, 3 catches, 31 yards. Okay, not too well, but for a tight end, that's not that bad. But he also finished with 6 targets, which is second most on the team in his first game back. At worst, he's that third option on that passing team where Jameis Winston is getting better and better. Now, we wanted to talk about Jameis Winston a little bit. But he's going up against New Orleans this week. New Orleans has given up 6 touchdowns to tight ends in the past 4 weeks. And they've also given up over 100 yards receiving on average. This is a terrific matchup. I know he didn't do well in week 2 against them, but, just lately, I know that when I was looking at this, they've given up touchdowns to Ryan Griffin and Anthony Fasano in the past 4 games. If those guys can score, so can Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I love the matchup. I think this is going to be an aerial assault game on both sides. Drew Brees throwing it out and Jameis Winston throwing it out. This is going to be a really interesting matchup. I think for Tampa Bay, there's multiple players this week that you have to must start. And for right now, I'm telling people they have to pick up Austin Seferian-Jenkins, not just for this week, but going forward, as I think he continues to build more and more chemistry. After we saw in week 1, he did really, really well with him. So I want to get your take. Seferian-Jenkins, must have.
Love
right?
him. Yeah, absolutely. I actually just picked him up in my league. I was rolling Jason Witten for a long time, I was trying to figure out if Romo was going to be back and that connection was going to be there. I actually dropped him and was rolling with Vance McDonald before, just trying to give someone else a chance to make a play, and he got hurt, so kind of opened up the door. I was skeptical about playing Austin Seferian-Jenkins last week just because, first week someone's back off an injury. You don't know how many snaps they're going to get and whatnot. So he kind of shut me up and had, a decent game, a good amount of targets, and I only think that's going to increase with, especially against New Orleans. I mean, everyone's been scoring on them. So I'm not a betting man, but I would take the over in that game and play every fantasy guy you can get your hands on. I think that's just going to be one of those 35-30 games where it's just an absolute shootout. So yeah, I'm big on him. I think he's a great guy to pick up and could definitely catch 80 yards and a touchdown, maybe 2, and be the turning point in your fantasy matchup.
Yeah, definitely. And now I want to talk about Jameis Winston. Obviously, we talked about the matchup this week against New Orleans. Jameis Winston has, he's been getting better as of late. He's thrown for, I believe, 7 touchdowns in the past 3 weeks. And now he's got his full repertoire of weapons. He's got Mike Evans, Vincent Jackson, Doug Martin, Charles Sims, and Austin Seferian-Jenkins as well. And he's got this terrific matchup against New Orleans. If I'm looking here correctly, in week 13, they gave up 331 yards passing, 49 yards rushing, and 5 touchdowns to Cam Newton. Obviously, Cam Newton's better, but that just shows how much New Orleans is giving up. And like you said, I agree with you 100%. I think this is a shootout. I think this is a high-scoring game where both quarterbacks are going to put up, more than 2 touchdowns potentially on both sides, and there's going to be multiple, playmakers that can get serious points in fantasy. And I think Jameis Winston could have a really good week now that he's got, all his weapons back. They're, playing well as of late. He's only improving as he, continues to play. And, just again, this matchup, you're playing almost everybody that's facing New Orleans every week, and this is definitely a week where you've seen quarterbacks like obviously Andrew Luck's out, Philip Rivers has been struggling as of late. I don't even know. Now Josh McCown's out. Johnny Manziel isn't there. So there's a lot of changes in the quarterback position, and I think that Jameis Winston could be one of those guys where you go and get him and start him at least this week, and he can help you get to the semifinals in your fantasy playoffs.
I absolutely agree. I think if you haven't jumped on the Jameis train yet, you're a little late to the party. He's been doing some great things the past couple of weeks, and most importantly, for him, he's been winning some games, and that's important. I was skeptical with Lovie Smith as his head coach. He's done some great things with the defense, but he went to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, so I wasn't. You got to take that with a grain of salt. But Jameis, you're right. He has all of his targets coming back strong. If Mike Evans could catch half of the balls he throws his way, Jameis might be, in the discussion talks for MVP. But he's kind of revitalized that whole Buccaneers, franchise in my eyes. And another guy that's kind of doing the same thing, Marcus Mariota. He's got a lot of weapons around him. Kendall Wright's finally healthy. Same with Delaney Walker, and Dorial Green-Beckham. Those guys are hitting on all cylinders. So I think if you need a quarterback this week, Jameis and Mariota are great starts if you're going to plug and play.
Yeah, definitely. I think he threw for 283 and 3 touchdowns last week. So definitely, even with the, I maybe wouldn't praise that playmaker core as much as you would. Kendall Wright's been inconsistent, also being injured. Delaney Walker has been terrific, but also then Dorial Green-Beckham has also been very inconsistent as well. And then their run game is changing a little bit. Antonio Andrews is controlling it. Now David Cobb gets double-digit touches. So it's a work in progress. But Mariota has done his best in that time. I still like Winston better this week just because of matchup and he has better weapons. But yeah, definitely. I would think both guys are worth, picking up this week and playing if you're looking for a chance to surprise some people. Another guy for me in terms of quarterbacks, and I'm surprised, when I looked at this, he was only owned in 44% of Yahoo leagues, so less than half. That's Ryan Fitzpatrick. He has done extremely well over the past, even 2 games. He threw for 4 touchdowns last week against the Dolphins, and then this past weekend he threw for 390 yards and 2 touchdowns. He destroyed the Giants secondary, and with Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, and then a healthy Chris Ivory, on that offense, he can do some things. He fought. He had thumb surgery on his non-throwing hand. I believe he had another injury earlier in the season, but he has done really well since coming back from the bye and with that thumb surgery. Thumb surgery was on a Thursday night game after, but he's done really well as of late. So that's, he's thrown for 6 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks, and he has a Titans team coming in. They gave up 322 yards passing and 5 touchdowns to Blake Bortles. Now keep in mind, that was without Alan Hurns. So he didn't have his number 2 receiver, and they still give up 5 touchdowns and 322 yards to Blake Bortles, who has been streaky, but has been better this season. So I love this matchup for Fitzpatrick this week. I think he's a top 10 quarterback play, and I think he could be a top 10 quarterback play the rest of the season, as he has a pretty easy matchup. Pretty easy schedule going ahead. And with Decker and Marshall healthy, I would be hard pressed not start him in most leagues unless you have a Carson Palmer or Tom Brady. But what about you? Fitzpatrick, you're in on?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always kind of been a Fitzpatrick guy, just someone that a competitor that seems to leave it all on the field. But this is kind of the perfect storm for him. He's got 2 big timers, all-pro receivers. Chris Ivory's been running the ball great, and Bilal Powell has been doing a lot. Both are, running the ball and catching the ball. So, the Jets offense is not anything to overlook. I mean, they've been doing some great things. They got 2 huge red zone targets, and, Fitz is going to throw. He's been throwing the ball this year more than I've ever seen. So, 40, 50 attempts per game. It's downright crazy if you ask me, but seems to be working, and Marshall's been tearing it up in the red zone. So I'd roll with Fitz over guys like Cuddy or Matt Ryan, Tannehill. I think they're trending the wrong way.
Yeah, definitely. Those guys are definitely on the wrong side of movement in terms of fantasy football rankings. One more quarterback I guess I'll throw out there who did really well to start the season. Then he had a knee injury that sort of derailed him for a few weeks, and now he's come back and he's done really well over the past 2 games. That's actually in the same division. That's Tyrod Taylor. He actually had a tough matchup going into Houston this past weekend, but he had 3 touchdowns passing and also 1 rushing touchdown. And he's now thrown for 6 touchdowns over the past 2 games, no interceptions. He's been running the ball a lot. He has over 50 yards rushing in the past 2 weeks. And I'm sorry, it was actually a shoulder injury he had as well. But he's also this week, this matchup I really like. He's facing the Eagles, who gave up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to Tom Brady. And again, we're talking about Tom Brady, where he's great, but he's lost a lot of weapons. His top 3 targets were Amendola, Scott Chandler, and James White. You didn't think about that to start the season, but he still did that. So I really like this matchup for Tyrod Taylor, who has been, working it with Sammy Watkins, and also, has a strong run game with LaShawn McCoy, and then, sprinkle a little Charles Clay and Robert Woods in there as well, who had a touchdown this past weekend. I really like this matchup this week, and I think that not only is he dangerous in terms of passing the ball, he could have a chance to, score, as he scored a rushing touchdown this past weekend, and he's not afraid to run it a little bit, which I don't think anybody who plays him is going to mind. So I think Tyrod Taylor is a top 12 play this week, which would put him squarely on that QB1 radar. Again, we're looking at Matt Ryan, Ryan Tannehill, Phillip Rivers, all guys that are trending the wrong way, and sort of come in, and enter Tyrod Taylor, who's been on the upswing. So I really like this matchup this week, and I think he's definitely a threat for more than 1 touchdown a week and close to, 300 yards, passing, but if not passing, then rushing and passing combined. Chris, what do you think about him?
I think it just depends on what kind of team you have. I usually look for just a consistent quarterback that's going to get me about 15 to 20 points a game. I usually rotate 2 of them depending on what defense. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. But Tyrod Taylor, I was never really sold on him, but he's just a playmaker. That he's going to either run the ball or throw the ball, and they do have some decent targets, and as long as Shady McCoy's running for 100 yards, I don't really think it matters who the Bills quarterback is. I think they're going to put up some decent numbers. So give me a quarterback with a good run game, and that's a QB1 in my book.
Definitely, it doesn't hurt when you have a strong run game, then you have an emerging potential superstar in Sammy Watkins at wide receiver. So now we'll move into sort of our start and sit section, our last part of the show. We'll go through the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions. Picking one that we start, or telling people the must start this week and the must sit as well. So I'll go first, obviously, like I have every other week. I'm the host, so I have that kind of authority. We'll start with the starts, and we'll go with quarterback position first. So this is actually a guy we talked about probably about 5 minutes ago, and that's Jameis Winston this week. I think Jameis Winston is a must start this week. He had 2 touchdowns this past weekend against Atlanta. He had a passing touchdown, and he also had a rushing touchdown as well. But New Orleans is getting up the most points. And in terms of my stats, I do a half PPR over the past 5 weeks as well. So that's my stat line consistently throughout when I bring you stats in terms of why I'm starting or sitting a guy. But over the past 5 weeks, 4 games, New Orleans has given up 15 touchdowns passing to quarterbacks. It's almost 4 games. and I think they've given up on average over 300 yards a game as well. I love this matchup. Like I said, he has his full plethora of weapons back. And then also he's thrown for 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions over the past 3 games. Like I said, he's getting better and better as the season goes on. He's got his full repertoire of weapons, and he's got a terrific matchup this week. So if people ask me, I'm telling you, Jameis Winston is a must-start for me this week. But what about you? What's that quarterback that you're telling people must start this week?
Yeah, I got Jameis right up there as well. I mean, it's kind of a perfect storm where he's going into New Orleans, who has opened the floodgates for opposing quarterbacks. Another guy, I think Eli and Mariota are also going to get it done. I know Mariota is going up against the Jets, but I just have a feeling that that they're going to force him to pass the ball, and he's going to be slinging it. He may throw a couple interceptions, but I just think that that's going to be kind of a big yardage game for him. Hoping that Revis doesn't play. I don't really think they're going to play him. He's one of their core guys. I'd wait until he's 100% healthy before rushing him back on the field. And again, Mariota and Tyrod might as well be the same guy. They could run for 70 yards in a game, and that's a good chunk of points right there. So I'm big on Jameis, Mariota, and Eli and Odell is a surefire start every week. And then on the other end, guys that you probably want to bench, Phillip Rivers.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
Jeff.
All right.
But no, some good names out there for starts. Jameis Winston, Eli Manning with Odell this week. Every week I should say. And then Marcus Mariota, who's been playing well as of late, even with limited weapons, and a suspect offensive line as well. So we'll go into our running backs. So we'll stick with the starts. We'll get into the sits later, I promise. But for start, my must-start running back this week is actually me, Jonathan Stewart. Jonathan Stewart ran for 82 yards on 21 carries and a touchdown. He also got 31 yards on 3 receptions in the passing game as well. Facing Atlanta, in the past 5 weeks, in half PPR leagues, they've given up the 5th most points to running backs per game. They have given up 5 touchdowns over the past 4 games. That's 3 rushing and 2 catching, or receiving, I should say. They're giving up on average 126 yards over the past 4 games, rushing 505 yards in the past 4 games. And Jonathan Stewart has gotten at least 20 touches in the run game alone over the past 8 games. So that's 160-plus carries in the past 8 games. 20 at least every week. He's being used well. Did have Mike Tolbert steal a touchdown from him, but he still was able to score. Carolina, they're undefeated. They're going into Atlanta, where Atlanta's been on the wrong side of the record. I think they've lost 6 out of their past 8 or something like that. And Carolina obviously is undefeated at 12-0. Love this matchup for him. Atlanta I think has given up the most rushing touchdowns this year overall to running backs, and they've been bad against the running backs lately as well. And Jonathan Stewart has been consistent over the past 2 months or so. So I'm telling people must start Jonathan Stewart this week. What about you, Jeff, for your must start running back?
Yeah, I got David Johnson. Assuming that the Vikings sit, they missed a bunch of guys last week. I think Anthony Barr and their safety. I can't think of his name right now. They were missing Harrison Smith. Yeah, they were missing a bunch of guys last week. 3 starters against the Seahawks, and that kind of went south for them. And the Cardinals coming off pretty dominant victory against the Rams, who have arguably one of the best D lines in the league. So I think David Johnson, I'd keep riding him. No real backup to threaten him with Ellington with a turf toe and CJ2K sideline. So I'd keep riding that horse until the wheels fall off. I think he's kind of a combination of size and speed and strength, where he's you don't have to worry about his durability. The only thing you have to worry about is if he fumbles and gets kind of and gets benched like we saw McFadden last night. But other than that, I mean, David Johnson is an absolute workhorse in my mind.
Yeah, definitely. He's a threat in the run game. He's so explosive, and then in the pass game as well. The only thing, and that was a knock coming into the NFL draft, is he's not that well at running into actually like a wall. He's not afraid of contact, but he's less likely to run into contact as opposed to trying to make a few moves and go into the open space. So that's my only concern with him, but I loved him coming out of Northern Iowa, and he's really done well, with both those guys out. And this is a short week, so Andre Allen is all but ruled out. Obviously, Chris Johnson probably won't play again at all this season unless they make it to the Super Bowl, and that's still a question mark at that. But yeah, he's a threat. This is arguably the best offense in football, and this is just I think they lost Lamal Joseph this past weekend. Anthony Barr is not expected to play, and then Antoine Exum is actually on the IR now. So yeah, they've lost some guys on their defense, which has been really good this season. So if they continue to not have those guys, and David Johnson continues to get the majority of carries and touches, I love it this week as well. So going into my must-start wide receiver this week is actually going to be Allen Hurns. So a lot of people are still shying away from him because he did not play last week. He had a concussion. He was cleared of the concussion today. He is ready to go for Week 14, and he has a terrific matchup against Indianapolis. Indianapolis has given up, in half PPR leagues, the fourth most points per game to wide receivers over the past 5 weeks. They've given up, over the past 4 games, to wide receivers. They've given up 200-plus yards on average, and also they've given up 6 touchdowns to wide receivers over the past 4 games as well. You got Allen Robinson on the other side. I think both of them could have a really good game. And Allen Hurns actually burned Indianapolis when they played them for the first time this season. In Week 4, he went for 11 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Love this matchup this week. He's ready to go. He's had some time to heal his other injuries. And I think he's going to have another good week as Blake Bortles has been hot as of late. What about you? Who's your must-start wide receiver this week, Jeff?
Yeah, I got Evans just to go with Jameis, and then some other guys I got circled were just everyone on Cincinnati. They're playing Pittsburgh this week, and it just seems like that's going to be another game where the ball is flying all over the place. So Andy Dalton's been, a lot better than expected this year. He's really matured and, showed his progression as a quarterback. So I'm all in with him as well. I think, Marvin Jones or AJ Green, I think those guys are going to go off, and, the Hurns Robinson combo is just another deadly wide receiving core, and that the Jags aren't going to be in they're not going to be running the ball 20 times a game. It's not going to be a low-scoring game. That ball is going to be going all over the place too. So I like
definitely,
that pick.
Definitely. You brought up a good point. Yeah, that's just going to be, Blake Bortles has been throwing the ball a lot, and I expect that to continue this weekend. So my must-start tight end this week is actually another one. Another play we talked about for on our waiver wire piece. That's Austin Seferian-Jenkins. Like I said, 6 targets, 3 catches, 31 yards against Atlanta. Not, it doesn't look that good on paper. When you look at it closely, he had 6 targets, which was second most on the team in his first game back in 9 weeks. And this is absolutely ridiculous. I had to crunch the numbers a little bit. But over the past 4 games, New Orleans has given up 34 catches, 444 yards, and 6 touchdowns to tight ends. On a per-game basis, that boils down to 8.5 catches, 111 yards, and 1.5 touchdowns. It's absolutely ridiculous. If you get a tight end that gets 100 yards by itself, or even 80, that's really well. But he has a chance to go and grab a score, if not 2. And, New Orleans has just been burned on every aspect of on defense. And I expect, you brought up Mike Evans, I brought up Jameis Winston, and now, Austin Seferian-Jenkins. This is a great week for Buccaneers players, and I think that Seferian-Jenkins is going to do really, really well against a team that has been handing points to tight ends.
Yeah.
But what about you, Jeff? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What about you for your must-start tight end this week?
I got Julius Thomas. I think I'm not sure about how Hurns is going to be. I'm very tentative anytime someone's coming off an injury. I usually kind of give them a game to get back in the swing of things, just because it's such a physical game. Who knows how their body's going to hold up? And Julius he's been doing some good things over the past couple of weeks, and I don't think the Colts D is anything to shy away from. Other than that, I got Charles Clay. He seems like he's getting back into his groove with Tyrod, and they were doing some great things earlier this year before each of them got a little bit banged up. Pretty much just looking for those games where there's going to be a lot of pass attempts, a lot of points scored, and just try and get as many pieces of the puzzle as you can.
Definitely. I think you pointed out, Charles Clay and Julius Thomas are on teams where their quarterbacks are trending upwards, and I think both with pretty good matchups this week, it could definitely have a chance for them to do well too. So moving into our sit section, these are must-sit players, at least that's what we're calling them. And I'll start with actually a guy I think you were starting to mention a little bit, but Phillip Rivers is my must-sit quarterback this week. He finished 18-35, which is just above 50% accuracy, which is really bad actually for a quarterback in the NFL. 202 yards and no touchdowns, but one interception against Denver. Now, granted, Denver is a really tough defense, but this speaks more to just how Phillip Rivers has been dealing with no weapons. And he's facing Kansas City, who've given up. They're in the top third of teams in the NFL over the past 5 weeks in terms of points to quarterbacks. Looking at this, over the past 4 games, Kansas City has given up on average 10.2 points to quarterbacks, which is not good at all. Typical quarterback hopefully gets 15, and that's really bad. And Rivers has scored double-digit points only once in the past 3 games, which again is really, really bad. But he's lost a lot of wide receivers. He lost 2 more over the weekend with Stevie Johnson going down with a groin injury, Dontrell Inman with a neck injury, and obviously Keenan Allen as well with the internal injury, the kidney injury, and then Malcolm Floyd is still there, but he's dealing with a serious shoulder injury as well. They've just been facing a lot of injuries, and their offensive line is not getting any better. So I really don't like his matchup this week, and I just don't like how he's been playing. I think you'd even drop him in some leagues, but definitely sit him this week. What about you, Jeff? What about that quarterback that you're telling people to sit this week?
Yeah, I like your pick with Phillip Rivers. I mean, you got to love the guy's fire and competitiveness, but at the end of the day, he's whether it's his fault or his receiver's fault, they've just been dropping like flies. So this week, my guy to sit is Matt Ryan. I just going against the Panthers, their defenses look so good, and Josh Norman's going to be shadowing Julio, and Roddy White, has showed his age this year, and ever since Leonard Hankerson has gone down, they've been missing that that kind of speed in the slot. So. And given all their O-line issues as well, I just think Matt Ryan is another guy going the wrong way. Tannehill, who knows what he's going to do against the Giants? I mean, just another guy that seems to just make it up as he goes, and so he'll either hit it in the fourth quarter and save a game, or he'll just fall off and end with 86 yards as we saw last week. So. Those are 2 guys I would avoid if possible. Definitely.
So we got 6 minutes left in the show. We got to get to 6 players, 3 players for me, 3 players for you. So we're going to speed it up a little bit. My must-sit running back this week is actually Todd Gurley, believe it or not. Todd Gurley ran for 41 yards on 9 carries against Arizona. Detroit has actually given up the second fewest points per game over the past 5 weeks in half PPR leagues to running backs. Gurley hasn't scored in the past 2 weeks. He's gotten less than 100 yards rushing in the past 5 games, and his rate has given up 1 rushing touchdown over the past 4 games. Gurley is amazing. He's an all-world talent, but that offense is just really bad in terms of offensive line and quarterback play as well. So I got to sit him this week. I don't trust him. I know he's been good, for fantasy owners that took a chance on him, when he started playing again, but he's got to sit this week. What about you for your must-sit running back?
I got him as well. I just think it's trending the wrong way for him. He can't carry the load of an entire offense, and with you can run the ball on first and second down, but if it's third and long, he's probably coming off the field. He's not a known pass catcher. He's not really gonna, that's pretty much the only thing the defense has to key on. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, so my must-sit wide receiver this week is actually going to be another, all-star rookie. That's Amari Cooper. Coming off it could have been a better game, but he had a decent game. 8 targets, 4 catches, 69 yards against Kansas City. Facing Denver, they give him the fewest points to wide receivers in half PPR leagues per game over the past 5 weeks. He went for 4 catches and 47 yards against Denver in Week 5. And they're giving up less than 100 yards combined to wide receivers over the past 5 games. I think it was 497. And they have given up no touchdowns in the past 5 weeks to wide receivers. I don't like this matchup for Cooper this week. I think he's still great, but this matchup this week really scares me. So what about you for your must-sit wide receiver?
I got James Jones. He's been killing it for me at the start of the year, and it's just about time to take Old Yeller out back. I just think he has the upside of a number 1, but for me it's kind of just putting him in the national spotlight, and hopefully he proves me wrong. But I think his lack of targets and the Packers' struggles to find a consistent passing game is really just the downfall of him and Cobb.
Yeah, no, it's that Packers offense has been a major disappointment this season. I know Rodgers has been, I think he's like top 5 in most quarterback rankings, but in terms of points, but other than that, everybody else has been really bad this season. So going to the last position, our must-sits this week. If anybody who's listened to the show, over the past 8 weeks, they know that I love Gary Barnidge. I love him, but this week I don't. 8 targets, 5 catches, 59 yards against Cincinnati. Not bad. Facing San Francisco. Giving up the second fewest points in half PPR leagues over the past 5 weeks to tight ends per game. They have given up less than 40 yards on average over the past 4 games to tight ends. That is 152 yards in the past 4 games, and no touchdowns as well. Manziel is obviously a quarterback again, which isn't that good for Barnidge. In 4 games with him at quarterback, Manziel has thrown to him 12 times. Barnidge has caught the ball 12 times and only 1 touchdown. So we're talking 3 catches and, a fourth of a touchdown. That's not good. I love Gary Barnidge, but not this week. What about you? Who is that must-sit tight end for you this week?
Yeah, I got Zach Ertz. I agree with what you're saying about Barnidge. I think he's kind of over the hill this season. I'd look elsewhere if you have the chance. Tight ends in general just kind of have dropped off past couple weeks, especially with Gronk and Jimmy going down. But just some guys like Ertz, Tammy. I mean, there really hasn't been a lot of reliable guys, so it's kind of just pick your poison at this point. But look for offenses trending upwards that have a chance. There's better guys out there in my opinion, so avoid Ertz or Tammy if you can.
Definitely, like I said, an awesome Seferian-Jenkins is a guy you can go and get. But that'll do it for us here this week. Be sure to check up on the new Hanging Einstein edition with my buddy Andy, People Pens, on Twitter. Not sure off the top of my head who he has for a guest, but he's had terrific guests on this season. Be sure to check it out. Be sure to follow Nickel Press on Twitter, Nickel Press TV. Be sure to follow myself on Twitter as well at DMoreNFL. And be sure to follow Jeff as well. Jeff is is a fun guy to follow on Twitter. He's always dropping jokes, but they're all football jokes, and he's a good presence on Twitter. You can find him on Twitter at J Spiegel, which is SPIEGEL2 on Twitter. But good luck this week, and we'll be talking to you next week.